All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy podcast. My name is Jenny Fennell, your host in CRNA. And today we are going to talk about rejection. So I get reached out to a lot by students who have experienced rejection and or being waitlisted. And I also have mentored a lot of students who have dealt with numerous rejections from schools. So I'm going to kind of share with you guys some of the things I've learned over the years of mentoring students with this scenario and kind of the key takeaways that can hopefully get you back on track. I want to preference this by saying that it is not uncommon to get rejected from anesthesia school. The reality is most people who get rejected do not share that they got rejected. What you see on social media, what you see on Instagram, you see people's highlight reels, you see people bragging about their acceptance. What you don't know is it might have been on their 13th try. And I have reached out to several of my students who have faced several rejections and asked them to share their story. They're usually more than happy to do so. And I think it's very inspirational when that type of thing takes place. But unfortunately, it's not usually something people are openly putting out there on Instagram or Facebook for people to read, or nursing forums or anything like that. So I think people paint an unrealistic picture of what applying to CRNA school is going to be like. And so when they do face rejection, they think that they're just not, it's not meant for them. They're not cut out for it. But the reality is plenty of working CRNAs have faced rejection and they do just fine. They're good CRNAs. They're great providers. A lot of them are now educators. So I don't want rejection or being waitlisted to hinder your progress with moving forward. So let's go ahead and dive into situations or scenarios that I see often and kind of what you can do to kind of combat those situations. Okay, so number one is I see the student who decides they want to do CRNA. They go into the ICU and then they kind of rush into their application. They rush into applying to CRNA school with barely a minimum of a year under their belt. And, they don't necessarily think much about it. They just think, okay, well, I have a good GPA. I now work in an ICU. I'm going to go ahead and apply and get in. And then they're kind of taken back by either not getting an interview or they get an interview and then they don't get in. And there's a couple things that could be happening here. Now, the problem with kind of giving anyone direct guidance is that every situation is very unique. Every application is very unique. So while it's hard to I'm not trying to umbrella everyone under the same umbrella, but I do know a lot of similarities do exist between certain situations. So I want to preference that this isn't going to categorize everyone in this category. But essentially a couple things could be happening. One, the applicant may have kind of a skewed view of what their GPA actually is. And what I mean by that is, have you really taken the time to break down your overall GPA and your science GPA? Schools will be doing this. And so it is key before you even apply, well before you apply, that you actually know what your science GPA is. The reason why this is so important is because you could have a 4.0 in your BSN and your ADN could only be a 3.2, but your science GPA could be a 2.8. So that being said, you may not even get an interview because schools will see the 2.8 science GPA. And even though your overall GPA between your ADN and your BSN is a 3.4, they're not going to give you a chance to interview. So you could be applying thinking you're fine because your GPA is a 3.4 overall, and then you get kind of kicked in the gut essentially when you don't get asked to interview and not understand why. And so one of the biggest mistakes, secondly, that I see students make in this situation is they do not reach out to the programs to get advice after this happens to them. They are left thinking, well, I guess the 3.4 is not good enough. And then they proceed to tell their coworkers that, who also want to be CRNAs, and then their coworkers get discouraged and they don't apply. And so this kind of creates a vicious cycle. And I have so many students who have been in similar situations to this and who are kind of misled into thinking that just because they're not a 3.8 student, or what if they have a academic pass that they're embarrassed of, therefore they just won't even apply. And see, even with a 2.8, it is still possible to get an anesthesia school. However, you will have your work cut out for you. You will have to take graduate level courses, more than likely, possibly more than one, such as grad pathophysiology, maybe even a chemistry course or pharmacology course, or a biochemistry or a microbiology course, grad stats course, maybe several of those to get that GPA up over a 3.0 to apply. Now, before you go out and start signing up for courses, please stop. Do not go out and sign up for graduate level courses, because I'm telling you this. You never want to do that, A, because it could be wasting your time and money, and B, all schools are going to be giving you different advice. So you want to make sure before you do anything that you're thoroughly researching your school of choice, your dream school. Even if you do not have a school in mind, even if you're like, well, Jenny, I have like 10 schools I'm going to apply to. How do I narrow them down? Pick a couple and reach out for guidance. If you think you have a lower science, or if you know you have a lower science GPA, pick a couple schools, see which ones will give you the time of day, and ask for a transcript review. They will give you guidance on what to do next. The ones who don't, move on, reach out to another program. I'm telling you, some schools will give you a free transcript review. Other schools will not make that time. It probably depends on how easily they can handle that with their staffing and what kind of resources they have and time they have available to give you. But it's always worth asking. You know, the worst thing they're going to say is, no, we don't do that, or no, we can't do that. And that's also where we come into play. I have students who are not able to get those types of one-on-one calls with the program director or get a transcript review. Well, guess what? CRNA School Prep Academy has Richard Wilson, who's a faculty member who does transcript reviews for our students. So there is help. Don't feel like you're ever stuck without help, because there is help out there. That's the first place to start. Do that first before you sign up for any classes. Because again, classes are not cheap, you guys. That's $2,000 or $3,000, and a lot of your time that could be spent on doing other things that would actually help you more. Because what if you took a pathophysiology course that won't even transfer to your dream school, but if you just would have known better, they actually prefer chemistry, and they would have told you what chemistry course to take and what transfer credits they take if you just would have reached out. And so that is what I mean. You don't want to just go taking courses without having any guidance, but you have to know your science GPA, and then you have to get guidance from there. Okay. So improve your science GPA. And if you don't know how, you need to reach out for guidance on that. So that's number one tip for you as far as potentially facing rejection or not even getting an interview. The second common reason that I see students potentially not even get an interview is because they misinterpret potentially the ICU experience or some of the other recommendations from the school. And when I say recommendations, it's because these schools, a lot of them put in this language in their application requirements: recommended, preferred. Well, it depends on how you interpret that, right? Well, if it's recommended or preferred, it's not required. That is where a lot of people go wrong. And keep in mind how competitive these schools are. They do not have to take a student who didn't take the preferred method of applying. They don't have to take the student who didn't take the recommendation. They will have plenty of students who took all the recommendations and did all the preferred preferences to pick from. So essentially, when you're saying no to a recommended item or to a preferred item, but not required, you're essentially already setting yourself up not to be the most competitive candidate. And these come down to things like CCRN, job shadowing experience, and ICU experience. So your school could say they may take ER experience on an individual basis. Well, what does that mean? It means they don't prefer ER experience, but they will consider it. If you're a above and beyond candidate in other areas, they will consider it. Does it mean you're going to be the most competitive applicant with that experience? No, it does not. Does it mean you shouldn't apply? Absolutely not. I'm not saying that at all. But it does mean you should reach out to your program and inquire about that experience, and also make sure you go the extra mile in the rest of your application and make sure you can make up for that if they see that as potentially a pitfall. And the same thing goes with NICU, PICU experience. Make sure you're researching your schools before you take these ICU positions. It is very unfortunate when I see these nurses have this dream to become a CRNA and then gain all their ICU experience in a NICU, only when they go to apply to CRNA school realize their school does not take the NICU experience. And it's a lot of times these schools, again, they don't have to be flexible. They don't have to take you on an individual basis. Sometimes you get lucky and they will consider you. But sometimes it's a hard, fast no. We don't take that experience. And so now you're stuck with a couple options. A, giving up on your dream of becoming a CRNA, or B, starting over again in a different ICU to gain that experience so you can then apply. So please don't let that happen to you. That can set you back years. And again, that's kind of hard to swallow if you had this kind of anticipation of going back to school for all this time only to be kind of, again, kind of sucker punched. So make sure you're researching your school. That should be starting from day one that you decide CRNA is for you. You should be researching your school, knowing what ICUs they accept, knowing what their requirements are, what their preferences are, and like academically, what kind of, where your GPA falls on a range of being competitive. I will tell you right now that most commonly accepted GPA, the average amongst all the schools in the country is right around a 3.5, 3.6. Now that means half are below that, half are above that. So don't get discouraged if you don't have a 3.5. I'm just letting you know that if you think you're on the low end of that spectrum, make sure you're taking an extra initiative to look into things you can do to better yourself. Some schools only require the GRE if you have a GPA less than 3.3. Some of it's a 3.2, some it's a 3.4. And so again, the only way you're going to know this is if you actually research your school. And I will preach and preach and preach. You guys go to the open houses. This is the best way. Sometimes and I've dug through many schools' websites at this point, and I'm right there with you. Holy cow. It can be a lot to dig through, and sometimes it's not easy to find. Some schools are a lot more forthcoming with stats and information than others. Some hasn't been updated for years. So again, make sure you're going to the open houses if they actually offer an open house. That is the best way to get the most concrete up-to-date information that you can find out there. It also could be an opportunity for you to network with current SRNAs and ask them questions and hopefully talk to the program director. So again, make sure you're using that to your advantage. So that's kind of situation number one that I see as being a common situation is students rushing into the application and not thoroughly researching their school and their requirements to apply and necessarily knowing how to be a competitive candidate between GPA and ICU experience. The next most common reason I see people get rejected from anesthesia school, you guys, is the interview. So 4.0 students with great ICU experience, leadership experience, you name it, they have it all. Their application, they're a rock star. And I've actually talked to several faculty who routinely say they have students who they're really excited to meet based on their resume and their application. They're like, oh, I can't wait to meet this person. They're just going to be an all-star. And they get in the interview and it's just bad. So, not everyone can be a beautiful interviewer. Not everyone can, connect with someone instantly who's a stranger. I mean, sometimes people are more gifted in that area than others, and it is what it is. The reality is you have to know that about yourself, and preparation is key for most people. There are going to be the occasional person out there who can whip into the interview with no practice, no preparation, and still do well. Well, if that's you, kudos, congratulations, that's awesome. But the vast majority are going to need preparation, including myself. My very first CRNA school interview did not go well. I knew it did not go well, but it was a learning experience, and it allowed me to prepare more for my second one. The other thing about CRNA interviews is knowing what you're walking into. And here's the thing, if you don't know what you're walking into, it's kind of hard to prepare, essentially, because you can guess, you can kind of, but if you know someone who can give you kind of a little bit of a heads up, like, hey, they would really like to hit these types of questions, or maybe be prepared to talk about your DNP project, or, just whatever kind of tips and pointers they can give you. Hey, you should hit your pharmacology. They ask a lot of pharm questions. I promise you that will help you. And I did a survey probably mid last year about 100 different CRNAs in a group that was nice enough to answer my survey. And I asked what did they see as being the best reason or the best way that they gained acceptance into school, or the most useful thing that they had getting acceptance in the school. And the majority that answered that question was knowing an SRNA or CRNA. That was what they found to be the most helpful thing gaining acceptance into school. Myself included. I really think the fact that I knew an SRNA who was a couple years ahead of me, who was already in school, was able to give me a lot of tips and pointers on the interview, and, you know, potentially even put in a good word with you with the program director, that right there is gold. That will only help you. Yes, I still had to perform. I still had to go in there and know my stuff, but now I knew how to prepare. You know, they were already anticipating me coming there. So that really will go a long way. And this will go back to, again, going to the open houses, job shadowing, making the connections, networking is so, so vital and important for your future, not just as an aspiring student, but even as a SRNA and a CRNA. As an SRNA, networking will get you jobs. As a CRNA, networking will get you jobs. You know, so, and potentially other opportunities that you're not even aware of. It might not even be on your radar. And it's just important to be connected, because this is a career choice, you guys, that you need to be invested in. This is your entire life. This is your future. This is your career. So, you know, you graduate, you put your blinders on and work, but if you invest back into your career that gives you so much, not only will the rewards will increase twofold. You'll enjoy your career more, you're going to have more satisfaction, and you're going to be helping support the growth of your actual career, your profession itself. So I encourage you to be that CRNA who gives back to your community, gives back to fellow students, gets involved in your local state PACs, and just gives back, because it's giving a lot to you. But sorry, I went off on a little tangent there, but that is definitely the second most common reason I see students get rejected, is lack of preparation for the interview. And at this point now, through CRNA School Prep Academy, I have SRNAs who love mentoring, who do mock interviews for my students. As much as I would love to do them all on one person, and typically we're doing about 40 mock interviews a month right now. And so there's no way I can physically make myself available for that many students. So it's been a great opportunity for the SRNAs to not only give back, but they also get paid for their time as well. And all the students who do the mock interviews, you guys, that's one of the most thanked services that I do, other than the courses and all the other workshops and live Q&As. Whenever I get a student who gains acceptance, one of the first things they shout out is who did their mock interview, because that is one of the key components of gaining acceptance. And they know that. They know that after their interview, they reflect back on what they did and they said, wow, I'm so glad I did that mock interview. That helped me in a huge way. I was so much more prepared for that interview. And so that is really one of the best things you can do, is prepare. And preparing by either networking with a current SRNA, CRNA that knows your program, or doing a mock interview. And, you know, and that doesn't hurt. You don't have to pay for a mock interview. You can do a mock interview with your parents, your spouse, your partner, whoever will give you the time of day, your coworker. Do a mock interview. Do as many as you can. Have a list of questions for them to ask you, and just try answering those questions. And I also encourage you to record yourself. Make sure you're recording yourself, because you may think you answered it well, but if you watch yourself answer a question, you may realize that you were clicking a pen the whole time, or you were looking off and darting your eyes around the room, or maybe you were biting your lip. And so those are all body language cues that you need to work on before you go into the big event. Your voice can even change when you're nervous. And it's nerve-wracking. You're in front of people that don't know you, and you know they're going to be judging you, and you know they're going to be evaluating you. So it's high pressure. So the more you practice that, the better you're going to get, and the more relaxed you're going to be. And I always tell my students, kind of like a TED Talk. No one just goes up and gives a TED Talk. They practice over and over and over. Those are really good lectures, right? I mean, they only get selected if they're good. And most of them have to rewrite and rehearse their lectures over and over again before they actually get on stage and give their talk. So same thing with an interview. You need to be rehearsing. You need to be prepared, and not necessarily rehearsed in a memory type of way, because they can decipher whether you just went and read a textbook and then you're vomiting the textbook back at them, versus actually understanding the knowledge, but rehearsed in a way that you won't be caught off guard and give them crickets. You know, it's something about physically speaking out what you might say that will kind of create kind of a muscle memory. So when you're nervous, you can still speak. Because I can't tell you, even the students who think they're prepared and are like, I don't usually get nervous in group settings. I don't normally get nervous when I speak. But, you know, for whatever reason in that situation, I couldn't gather my thoughts. And it's probably from lack of them actually rehearsing out loud what they were going to say to those questions and practicing. It's like the nerves got to them, and then they froze and they couldn't find their voice. So speaking out loud is important when it comes to practicing your interview. So those are the two most common reasons I see students face rejection. Now, there could be a whole other host of issues, but by far, like I said, it's usually the science GPA, the experience, and the interview that play into the vast majority of rejections. I also want to touch briefly on waitlist. Okay. I know I've mentioned this in a previous episode, but getting a waitlist is getting an acceptance. And that's not always seen that way by students. And I think it is kind of a blow when you're like, you get that, it's like you kind of almost got in, but you didn't really get in. And you don't know how to take that. You're like, well, gosh, I obviously wasn't good enough for them. So, but they're saying, yes, you are good enough. We just don't have room for you. But if another student, and trust me, this happens a lot, where there are a lot of students who go on to apply to 3 or 4 other schools, and maybe they gain acceptance at the school that isn't their preference. And so they'll drop off that list and give you a chance on the wait list. It happens all the time. People get off wait lists. It does happen. So don't give up hope. It's not over just because you got waitlisted. Now, a lot of schools will not tell you where you fall on that wait list. Some schools don't even have a wait list preference, meaning they don't order you. They just put you in a giant pool. I think the vast majority do at least list their students, but I was actually told by an CRNA who reached out about the wait list and gained acceptance that she was one of the only people who ever reached out to the schools to inquire about where they were on the wait list. And so I think a lot of students kind of write it off. Like they get waitlisted and they just kind of like, oh, I'll just forget about it. I'll move on. They don't want me. And they just kind of say, well, they'll contact me if they want me. That's a mistake. You really want to be taking that period of being on a wait list to actually do more. Okay. Including reaching back out to your program and kind of checking on the status, and also saying, hey, I just got an additional certification. Maybe on top of your CCRN, now you have your CSC or CMC. And so now you can add that to your ICU certifications. Or maybe you retook the GRE and now you scored 10 points higher. It's always worth doing those extra things. If you can pinpoint after your interview, if you can pinpoint why you got waitlisted or why you got rejected, make sure you're following up. That is one of the most important things you can do to better yourself going back into the interviews or getting off the wait list. So make sure you're trying to follow up with the schools. Well, first and foremost, email a thank you. You want to make sure you're thanking them, and make sure you thank people individually if you can, if you know their name and personal email. Make sure you're thanking them for their time. And if you can point out anything in like kind of personal from your interview that you want to remember, like have them remember you by, then please do so. You can also look up questions that you didn't know, because if your answer was, I don't know that, but I'd be happy to look that up, look it up and get back with them in the thank you email. They will like that kind of initiative. And essentially SRNAs are expected to look up information they don't know in clinical. So start off with the interview by doing it. But yeah, you want to be following up. And if you can pinpoint, well, maybe your GRE score, maybe they preferred a 300, but maybe you only had a 297 and you got waitlisted. Well, let's just say that was your scenario. Well, go retake the GRE, get a 305 and call and report that score and submit the documentation when you're on the wait list. You never know. If they don't have an order to your wait list and you do those extra things, you could now be bumped to the top of the list. Or even if you are in order, maybe you'll get put higher up on that list, because now some of the schools go by a grading system. They'll grade you based on your on all the stuff that you submitted. So by having that higher GRE score, you could be bumped up that list. And so it definitely plays to do things like that. You want to make sure you're taking advantage of following up with the schools and seeing how you can improve. Some schools will give you great feedback. Some schools won't give you any feedback. And so that's okay. It just because they don't give you any feedback doesn't mean you shouldn't keep trying to improve or trying to get feedback. And again, that's kind of where we can come into play. CRNA School Prep Academy helps a lot of students in that situation. But I will say the vast majority of schools are willing to work with you and give you feedback. Again, probably depends on, can they get back with you? Do they have enough staff who can respond to emails and give you that feedback? It just probably depends on the program and the staffing essentially of the program. But doesn't mean you shouldn't try. So, and don't feel bad if you get crickets. Still seek out guidance and try to move forward, okay? And there usually is always something else you can do to kind of better your odds the next time around. I just talked to another student recently she's a great candidate. She looks great on paper. She has everything. She's a good GPA, good ICU background. It's just her interview. They actually flat out told her she came off too confident. Now I know people always preach confidence. And so it's kind of funny to hear that that's what they didn't like about her, was that she seemed overly confident. But there's also something to be said to that too, because if they see a student who potentially could think they're always right and maybe be somewhat argumentative, like maybe they're the experts and they're not going to be able to be a novice again and be that learner, that student again, they might be fearful that they might not handle themselves well in the clinical setting. So overconfidence can be as bad as underconfidence. So it is kind of unique, kind of seeing how, again, some schools pick up on things like that. But they did say, come back next year. We liked your app. I mean, they liked her. They really, really liked this person. So it doesn't mean that she's going to give up. It doesn't mean she's not worthy of being a CRNA. It just means that now she knows where her weakness was. She knows what to work on and to go back in it next time and do better. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And again, if this is you, if this is speaking to you, please don't get discouraged. Okay. This is only the beginning. Every time that you apply is practice. It only becomes not practice when you actually gain acceptance. Okay. So just think of it that way. You're going to improve upon your interview skills. You're going to improve upon your application every time until you get in. So yes, keep going, keep moving forward, one foot in front of the other. That's what it is every single day, right? One foot in front of the other. So this journey's not over for you, and I'm excited for your future. You guys have a good week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.